Hey guys, it's Conan, and today I'm doing a video that a lot of you guys have been asking for lately. I'm going to be showing you guys all of my favorite art supplies, and I'm saying favorites in air quotes because I don't really know if these are my favorites. Most of these things are just the supplies that I learned on, so I don't know if you're allowed to call them your favorites if you really haven't experimented that much with different types of materials for doing the same thing. And so since I haven't tried a bunch of different brands and seen which one is the best, I don't know if this is like a real favorites. But I guess you can more see it as like a beginner's thing because these are the supplies that I've been using since I was a beginner 4 years ago. Take all of these suggestions with a grain of salt. Is that even the saying? What does that even mean? When I started making bigger art pieces when I was a freshman in high school, these were the supplies that were handed to me by my art teacher, and these are the supplies that I was told to buy, so I've just been using them ever since. I don't have any problems with them, I do like them, so they're my favorites, but I don't know if they'll be your favorites. These are just suggestions. I am also a believer in the fact that the best art supply you have is definitely the one that's closest to you, or the one that's at your disposal. If you want to make art, you don't have to buy these specific things. You can still make incredible art with cheap supplies. You can still make incredible art with expensive supplies. You can just make art with anything, and I don't want any of you guys to go out and purchase all these items thinking that they're necessary and that they're going to make you better or more like this or more like that. It doesn't really matter. I believe it is always the artist behind the supply that makes the art good. I categorized my artwork into 3 categories: Prismacolor drawings, paintings, and watercolors, just to make it easier to explain the supplies, because most of the techniques that I use are pretty streamlined every single time I make one of those 3 types of pieces. And so I'm going to be presenting all of the supplies with the artwork that I made with the supplies. I hope that makes sense. I have all of my notes here. I hope I don't forget anything. Let's get started. Nice and toasty. The first type of artwork I make is Prismacolor drawings. And I think you guys have probably seen this guy before. He is the really large Prismacolor piece that I did my junior year. I'm a senior now. Every single year I make something really intricate and really just meticulous with Prismacolors. And for those of you who don't know, Prismacolors are these types of colored pencils that a lot of artists use. That's what Prismacolors, I think, are really useful for, is making really detailed, really sharp, small things on a large scale. That wasn't a well-worded sentence. Let's talk about the supplies that I used to make this guy. These are Prismacolors. They are these colored pencils that are very expensive and very, I don't know, they're nice quality. This is a very large pack that my mother got for me on my birthday a few years ago. They're expensive, guys. These guys, they are expensive. I'm not going to lie to you guys. They're expensive and they're a bit overkill, but every single art classroom that I've been in has had these, and so I learned on them, so I bought them because they're the ones that I know how to use. Things to take note of is they are very waxy. They're not like Crayolas or things like that. They have a completely different texture. They almost have a shine to them, and what that does is it makes it really easy to blend. So when you're doing skin tones or when you're doing really anything, blending and getting that almost skin-like realism is a lot easier. If you're thinking about buying Prismacolors, I would definitely suggest buying them online because they're a lot cheaper online than in the stores. I think this is the biggest pack, I'm not sure, but I think my mother got this on Amazon for like $100-ish. I don't really know, and yeah, they're expensive. The reason why I use Prismacolors though, and the reason why I've always used them, is because I just haven't found a good substitution for them. Since it's not broke, I ain't gonna fix it. I'm sure there are a cheaper alternative, and I haven't done my research, but if any of you guys have done your research, please comment down below any substitutions for Prismacolors that you may know, because some other people might want to know it, and I'd like to know it as well. When I'm getting started with a big piece like this, I usually start off with just a basic pencil sketch with a basic pencil. I don't use a fancy pencil for this, just use a pencil. I'm not the type of person to grid. My teacher taught me how to get things onto paper without gridding, because she told me that when she went into art school, everybody made fun of the people who were gridding, which I doubt they do anymore, but she just was like, Conan, you need to learn how to draw portraits without gridding, and so I don't grid. I draw most of my Prismacolors on this type of paper named Bristol board, and Bristol board is just a really thick and smooth paper, so it's perfect for Prismacolor because with Prismacolor you draw really hard, at least I do, and that way it doesn't mess up the texture and it just goes on really smoothly. Other than a basic pencil and Prismacolors, there's not really that many supplies that I use to make a Prismacolor drawing, other than like an eraser. But yeah, that's all I use to make this. painting. This is very heavy. Okay, the next type of artwork that I make is an acrylic painting. This is too large for me to show you in frame. That's me. I'm like... This is just a basic acrylic painting. I've done a lot of paintings with the same supplies, and let's go through them. The type of paint that I use and the type of paint that I always use are these Liquitex basics. Whenever we first started learning how to paint in my high school art class, I don't take like professional lessons or anything. I just have an art class where we're allowed to just freelance paint whatever we want. Whenever we first were learning like the basics of how to mix colors and things like that, she let us buy 3 colors. She let us buy cadmium red, ultramarine blue, and cadmium yellow. And these were the 3 colors that we were only ever allowed to use. And they're still the colors that I only use. You're able to make an entire painting with these 3 colors just by mixing them. If you haven't learned color theory, painting is hard to do if you haven't learned color theory. I just started painting about 2 years ago, so I'm still not that good at painting, but I really like it. It's very different from drawing because I just kind of like slap paint everywhere and then it's done. Basics paint is very thick paint and it dries shiny. Unlike a lot of those acrylic paints that come in the little bottles, it's not runny and it has a better hold to it, so I find it's a lot easier to paint with it because you have a little bit more control. I have tried other brands of paint and I always just come back to this one because it's not extremely expensive. It's not like Winsor Newton, and also it's pretty readily available. I don't have any problems with it. I've used it for 2 years now. I like it. The next thing that I use a lot and I don't actually have with me is this thing named Acrylic Matte Medium. Basically what it is it's this clear stuff. I guess it could almost be comparable to like clear nail polish. It's kind of hard to explain. What it does is it waters down paint. That way it dries slower and you can put thin layers of color over certain areas for tones and things like that. It is super useful if you know how to use it. I think a bottle of it is somewhere around like 20 bucks though, but it lasts forever and ever. I use it a lot on a lot of my paintings, and for some reason people always think that my paintings are done in oil, and I think it's because I use acrylic matte medium that makes it look like they're oil paintings. You're able to get those very precise tones without having to mix a completely new color. I paint all of my paintings on this material named masonite board. You can get a huge piece of it at Home Depot for like $6 or something, and then they'll cut it up for you. I've painted every single one of my paintings on masonite board. I've never painted on canvas before. I'm sure it's good. I'm sure it's good to paint on canvas because a lot of people paint on canvas. I like masonite board because it's nice and solid. And also if you're just experimenting with painting, it's a cheap material that you can learn on. You don't have to feel bad about it not turning out good or something like that. The last category of artwork that I could think of is my watercolors. This kind of covers a lot of stuff. I've never painted a large scale watercolor painting. They're usually just little things like this, but I really do love watercolor, and it's what I first started on, even like before drawing even. It was just watercolor because it's fun and it's messy and you just get to do whatever you want. The types of watercolor that I use are these Reeves watercolors, and they're the ones in tubes. Again, same story. These are just the ones that I've found at most stores, and they're just cheap and they're readily available and they have a lot of colors. I guarantee there are better watercolors than Reeves. I've used better watercolors than Reeves and I've loved them, but Reeves is just always there and I always end up using it. The reason why I like the tubed watercolor, contrary to a palette, is because I feel like this dries shinier and it doesn't have those little dust or chalk particles in it, and that's why I like this more. There's only ever chalk particles if the palette is really cheap, but since Reeves are pretty cheap in comparison to a lot of watercolors, I think it's a pretty good deal and you can find them everywhere. Paper wise, I paint on whatever. I never have a certain type of paper that I always use. It just depends on the painting and what type of surface I want and what kind of grain I want. In some of my paintings you'll see this kind of inking done, and I do all of that inking with micron pens. I like micron pens because they're really sharp. They usually don't bleed through paper. They have so many sizes and I can just trust them. I have used other ones before and I always do come back to these. I can say that microns are definitely my favorites. They just give such a clean line. They don't like spread. They're just good. I like microns. Next thing that I use for a lot of things, including drawings and paintings and watercolor paintings, is a white gel pen. White gel pens are super useful. If you don't have one, I would suggest getting one. This is by the brand Jelly Roll, and this is the one that I've used for like a few years now. It's just white paint in a pen basically, and it's really useful because when you're trying to get little highlights and little like sparkles and things like that, this is what you want. This is incredibly useful and I always suggest it to all of my friends. Brush wise, I never have a particular brush brand or brush type that I use. I just use whatever brush is near me. I find that in general I like brushes that are pretty stiff and have a bounce back to them. I don't like those really fluffy ones that don't really have much hold to it because I feel like I can't control what I'm painting with it. So that is all of my favorite art supplies, if these are even considered favorites, because they're more just kind of like basics, the stuff that I've always used. I guess they're my favorites because I've used them for so long, so yep, those are them. In the comments below, I'd love to know what kind of art supplies you guys use because I'm always looking for new art supplies. I love art supplies. I love going to Michael's and just walking through the aisles, and so I'd love to hear what types of paints or pens or colored pencils you guys use because I'm a huge lover of art supplies. I'd also love to hear your opinions on things that I've used because I'm sure everyone has different opinions, and some more experienced artists out there, since I've only been making art for about 4 years now, probably have a little bit of better input. So if you guys have better input, I'd really love for you guys to put it in the comments below. That way other people could read it and that way I can learn as well. So that's it. I love you guys so much. I'll see you guys in a few days with a brand new video. God bless and goodbye!